Congress takes action on one front and definitely does not on another. The House passes a sweeping spending bill, while Senate Republicans block election security legislation just hours after Bob Mueller testified. In case there's any doubt about Russia, which there should not be, a new report from the Intel Committee shows just how aggressive Moscow was and how unprepared the U.S. was to deal with it.
Well, you know, we're going to talk about that in a second, but Willie, the most shocking thing about this is that Robert Mueller testified that not only did Russia try to interfere with our 2016 election, and not only did Donald Trump's, all of his intel community, and Kirstjen Nielsen, when she was the Homeland Security, said Russia undermined American democracy in 2016. We remember back then, the warnings came, but Moscow Mitch, that being Mitch McConnell of Moscow, Kentucky, actually blocked that and said he threatened the people that were going to try to get that information out to warn Americans. Now we have, almost 4 years later, the same warnings coming not only from the independent counsel, which 60% of Republicans believe ran a fair investigation, Republicans. We now have the Intel Committee in the Senate run by North Carolina Republican Richard Burr saying what? That the Russians tried to infiltrate all 50 states in 2016 to undermine American democracy and to undermine a free and fair election. And on the same day, Willie, Moscow Mitch blocks 2 bills that would actually protect us from a Russian invasion in this area.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for bearing the lead, which is the Red Sox historic dismantling of the Yankees last night at Fenway Park, 19-3.
You guys, Lemire and I predicted that you guys were going to sweep us, so okay, you win 3 out of 4.
Okay,
great.
good.
But go ahead.
Okay, so we pushed that to the side. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The Senate report that came out yesterday from the Intel Committee, led by Republican Richard Burr of North Carolina, was damning, but it merely reiterated what we've heard over the last 2 years, that we've heard from all the intelligence agencies. We heard from the Mueller report. We heard from Robert Mueller's testimony, who said memorably 2 days ago, Russia is interfering with our elections right now as we sit here, and will interfere again in our 2020 election. It's happening in real time. Now you have the Senate Intel Committee coming out and detailing in its own way after its investigation what exactly Russia and other countries have been doing. So to have Mitch McConnell step in between election security and this country and our future elections is what coming up in 2020 is outrageous. I mean, when he talks about it, Mitch McConnell talks about it in terms of this conspiracy. He calls it the Russia hoax. You know, he said, well, this is just another bill, a partisan bill from Democrats who've been pushing a hoax. Well, the hoax is not a hoax. It's what Robert Mueller spent 6 hours the other day detailing. It's what the Senate Intel Committee now details in a long report with more to come. I don't know how you can, in good faith, sit in denial about what is happening and what's going to happen in the next election.
Well, you know, we're about to get to some blockbuster polls, Donnie, that are going to show just how much that Donald Trump still is suffering out there in the polls. He can fire all the pollsters he wants. But they're on to him. A lot of Americans are on to him now. But I want to talk about Moscow Mitch. And let's just line this up for a second. So you have Robert Mueller, a lifelong Republican, the most respected FBI director in the history of this country, a Vietnam War hero, a guy that made the Army Rangers Hall of Fame, a guy who said Russia is trying to invade America right now. Moscow Mitch says it's a hoax. You have his own Intelligence Committee in the Senate, led by Republican Richard Burr, saying that Russia tried to infiltrate all 50 states back in 2016 and are going to try it again. Moscow Mitch calls it a hoax. You have the Republican Trump-appointed FBI director saying that the Russians infiltrated America's democracy and are going to try again. Moscow Mitch calls it a hoax. You have the director of national intelligence, saying that the Russians tried to infiltrate our election system, tried to subvert American democracy, and they're going to try it again. Moscow Mitch said it's a hoax. You have Trump's appointed director of the CIA saying that the Russians are trying to undermine American democracy, that the Russians tried in 16, will try again. Moscow Mitch calls it a hoax. You have military intel people, the military intel community, knowing, because they were fighting the Russians in 2015, 2016, and are still fighting them every day to stop them from continuing to infiltrate American democracy. Donnie, Moscow Mitch says it's a hoax. Now, tell me, I understand that there's an oligarch that I've read is going to be setting up a big aluminum plant in Moscow Mitch's home state. I don't know if that's it, but how can Moscow Mitch so willingly turn a blind eye, not only this year, to what his Republican chairman of the Intel Committee is saying, to what Robert Mueller is saying, to what the FBI director is saying, to what the DNI is saying, to what the CIA is saying, to what the United States military intel community is saying? How can Moscow Mitch keep denying that Vladimir Putin continues to try to subvert American democracy?
Joe, I love that you're calling him Moscow Mitch because, frankly, it's a continuation of something that you.
What am I supposed to call him? Cocaine Mitch? He's not. People call him Cocaine Mitch. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe he's right. I mean, he's only Cocaine Mitch if he's running cocaine to Moscow because he's Moscow Mitch.
Because Joe, what you're doing.
This is seriously. He is aiding and abetting Vladimir Putin's ongoing attempts to subvert American democracy, according to the Republican FBI, CIA, DNI, Intel Committee directors. All Republicans are all saying Russia is subverting American democracy, and Moscow Mitch won't even let the Senate take a vote on it. Joe, that is un-American.
Joe, you're doing this because it's something you started yesterday. Now, I want to wind back yesterday because, to me, and I've been on the show for 10 years, frankly, and I've listened to a lot. I've listened to you a lot. We've brawled on the air a lot. And what you said in a couple of minutes yesterday, to me, is the most important thing that's ever been said on this show, on any show on this air, and that we are at war. It is time for the Democrats to wake up. We are playing against cheaters and liars or stealers. And with all due respect to Michelle Obama, when they go high, when they go low, we got to do whatever we have to do. We actually have a government led by Moscow Mitch and criminal Trump. Oh, by the way, we're going to call him unindicted criminal Trump now because in 2 instances, he has been an unindicted criminal. So I know in regular, when you're playing fair, you're supposed to call him President Trump. Just like we're going to call him Moscow Mitch, we're going to call him criminal Trump. And another message for the Democrats, it is time to move forward. There are 2 takeaways from Mueller that we're going to use as we go to war. Number 1, the president broke the law, and when he's out of office, he can go and will go to jail. And number 2, we are vulnerable with our election systems. That's our 2 things. We may not have won the battle of impeachment, but we're going to win the war of putting him in jail, whatever we have to do. And we're not going to necessarily play fair. And for all the intellectuals out there whose hair is going to go on fire, but we're becoming like them, we cannot lose the next election. We will go back 50 years. We have to start. And one other thing, Joe, let me just finish. The one tool we have to use that the Democrats never use is fear. Start to stop talking about Donald Trump today and yesterday and start to paint a picture of what the next 4 years would look like. Maybe even the next 8, 12 years, because he doesn't think he's going anywhere, of the possible path to a dystopian society. There is no more playing next. We cannot bring a knife fight to a bazooka gunfight.
All right. But here's the thing, though, Gene Robinson, we don't have to look 4 years into the future. We can look right now. And, yes, we are at war. We are at war, and Russia declared that war in 2016, and they decided they were going to subvert American democracy. And every one of Donald Trump's appointed intel chiefs said, Russia is trying to subvert American democracy. Robert Mueller said it a few days ago, and yesterday, the intel chief, the Republican intel chief that I came into Congress with in 1994, he's a conservative guy. The entire intel committee said the Russians tried to subvert American democracy in 50 states, and they're still trying it. And yet Moscow Mitch keeps killing any bill that would protect American democracy from Vladimir Putin's spies. What do we do about that, Gene?
Well, you know, what do we do about it? We unelect this as Donnie Deutsch called him, criminal president. And we call it out. I mean, I'm in total agreement with the when they go low, we get busy. Argument. I mean, this is an emergency. This is a situation I've never seen in American politics, and we're in danger. We really are endangered by this president and this administration and this Senate Majority Leader who will not allow a vote on this crucial legislation. The scary
Protecting
thing
America.
about
He will not, Gene, allow a vote on protecting America. The DHS secretary, the FBI director, the CIA director, DNI head, they all, our military community, everybody has said that American democracy is at risk. And Mitch McConnell, Moscow Mitch, continues to cover up for Vladimir Putin and won't allow the vote.
He does. And, you know, Richard Burr is not a flaming liberal who runs the Senate Intel Committee, but that report is chilling. And one of the most chilling parts is that the Russians were trying to infiltrate and snoop around election systems in all 50 states. In all 50 states. I mean, so it's not, you know, if you think we are somehow protected by the fact that we basically have 50 different electoral systems instead of one, and therefore that's less vulnerable, well, that seemed like a good rationale, but that's not the case. They were in all 50, and the other chilling thing is that a lot of the incursions looked like recon missions. You know, so they would sort of map the terrain so that they could come back. And guess what? We have an election next year, and they'll be back. It's just stunning that. But this is what we fall into in this country.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.